Happy Horror Christmas, everyone. Halloween lasts all month long in these parts, and that means we've got even more time to listen to some amazing horror fiction podcasts. And one of the best, by far, is No Sleep. Over 100 million downloads and 2 successful US tours, and this month they released their Halloween episodes. And their Halloween episodes are very, very special. Go check their feed out for the past ones, because they really push the boat out. Now, I mention them here for 2 reasons. Firstly, they're excellent, and secondly, David Cummings of No Sleep is an executive producer on Darkest Night. Darkest Night is a binaural audio drama that places you at the centre of a recovered memory that sounds as though it's happening around you in real time. Each chapter delves into the last memories of the recently deceased, slowly revealing a horrifying master plan. Who is weaving this master conspiracy? What is their ultimate goal? Darkest Night will tell you, and scare the pants off you as it does so. Darkest Night is a binaurally recorded horror podcast, so when you listen in headphones, it's like a 360-degree experience. They even have a full score and real string section on there by Alasdair and Andrew Jocelyn, and they work with musicians like Odell, Macklemore, and Mark Lanigan. Then there are the narrators. Season 3 is narrated by the legendary Keith David, The Thing, Requiem for a Dream, Armageddon, one of the really good seasons of Community, like 18,000 other amazing things, as well as features acting appearances from RuPaul, Paul Scheer, Constance Zimmer, Dennis O'Hare, Missy Pyle, Michelle Visage, Jason freaking Mewes, yep, Jay from Jay and Silent Bob, David Cummings, Dan Harmon, and many, many more. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm talking to you so much about this show. Well, it's for 2 reasons. The first is they have some incredible talent. And secondly, we have a treat for you. We're actually going to debut the first episode from Season 3 after this episode of PseudoPod. And so, without further ado, over to me. PseudoPod, episode 615, October 5th, 2018. This week's story, The Shrike, by Cameron Suey. Hello everyone, welcome to PseudoPod, the weekly horror podcast. I'm Alasdair, your host, and this week's story is a PseudoPod original, and one that comes to us from a long-term friend of the show, and is narrated by another long-term friend of the show. The thing is, I can't really recommend a favourite for you, because everything they do is really, really good. We will throw links to their pages on the database into the show notes for you. Seriously, just click on them, pick something, and go. They both do just incredible work. The story itself is a PseudoPod original, and one that covers some interesting ground. So without further ado, get ready, because Cameron, Sandra, and us have a story for you, and we promise you, it's true. The crowd is roaring, and the fists are thrown up in the air.
The Shrike by Cameron Suey, narrated by Sandra M. Odell. By the time she's thrown herself upright and grasped for the remote with shaking hands, it's too late. She's seen it. She's heard the words. Instead, she stumbles for the kitchen sink, feeling her throat clench with acrid, stinging horror. The vibrant green and brown hues of the nature documentary wash the inside of her darkened apartment, sonorous tones of the narration hanging in the air. She tries not to listen as she hunches over the filthy, dish-choked sink, retching and gasping for air, but the words still come. Thorns. Impale. Butcher. Coupled with ambien and supermarket gin, the nature documentaries had been the only thing that helped her fall asleep for the last month. But that's over now. ruined in a single fusillade of frames and words. She shuts her eyes tight, presses her face to the cracked tile of the kitchen counter as sobs rock her wasting frame. Behind her eyelids, she sees what she always sees. Trinity on the spike, wide and terrified eyes going glassy with blood loss as her little mouth struggles and fails to form a plea for help. But now the jagged spar of rusted iron in the little girl's throat has a name, christened by the late-night documentary on the cruel hunting habits of predatory birds. Shrike. It repeats in her ears, a ringing bell striking midnight. Shrike. In the cold clarity of the moment, she feels a silver thread of relief. She knows the name of the thing now. It is no longer just a factor, one link in the chain of her fatal, unforgivable mistake. The Shrike is an entity. It is something outside herself she can blame. Something she can hate. Her guilt gives way to a cold and searing anger, like ice pressed too long against skin. She relishes the feeling, letting it hone her, giving her purpose. She wakes early and calls the office. Instead of tearfully requesting one more week's extension, she tells them she won't be back, tells them to fuck off and choke on their performative sympathy. The thundering pain in her head relents under the onslaught of coffee and ibuprofen. She gets fully dressed for the first time in a week and goes downstairs to see the Shrike. It's not far from her apartment, across Lake Street and down the sharply slanted private sidewalk, passing from rows of apartments to the lavish houses of Seacliff. At the bottom, tucked between two driveways leading to cavernous garages, there's the little stairway of reclaimed redwood and the sandy public footpath to the beach. She slows now, 20 meters from the spot where Trinity died. There's still a ragged strip of caution tape at the bottom of the stairs and 2 bright orange traffic cones that mark the point of separation between past and present. She had expected city maintenance workers would remove the Shrike now that it had taken a life, but they've merely put up a meek warning and let it be. She can see it as she approaches. The sounds of the ocean on the far side of the rise churn with the lazy Monday morning beach traffic. She follows the meandering footpath that bisects the undeveloped triangle of grassy dunes, where the trickle of Lobos Creek continues its polluted babbling, unaware of her accelerating heartbeat. She stops 10 meters from the spot where her child died. The Shrike, a rusted thorn of rebar, juts up from the sand in the middle of the path. She doesn't know if it was part of an old building or maybe a small retaining wall to keep the hillside from collapsing. Any trace of its previous purpose is gone. It must have been longer once because the end terminates in a smooth plain where more of the iron was sheared away. The salt spray and ocean air has pitted and scarred most of it, but the flat, angled blade at the tip glints in the pale morning sun. She used to wonder why it hadn't been cut shorter, down by the dirt, when she walked by it with Trinity every morning on the way to daycare. For the first few months she'd held her daughter's hand as they passed, a queasy, inarticulate sense of dread welling up as she navigated gingerly around it. She always considered taking the long way down the hill, walking the cracked sidewalks of 25th Avenue just to avoid the irrational sense of danger the tiny iron rod elicited in her. But the footpath through the dunes saved her 5 minutes, sometimes 10 if Trinity was in full magpie mode, stopping to pick up every bottle cap or discarded trinket. So she swallowed the anxiety and held her daughter close. As Trinity sprouted, long and lean, she chafed at her mother's hand-holding. The girl ran ahead on the familiar route, leaving her mother racing to catch up. And when the weeks grew longer and the money stretched thin, sometimes she was still hazy and headachy from the night before. The whispering dread of the anomalous metal spike subsided in the fog, and she let Trinity run ahead, calling out at her to be careful, but too far away to stop what was coming. It's taller now, she realizes. Not by much, just enough so that someone who'd obsessed over its presence would notice. For one oily moment she imagines that it has grown, fed on the blood of her child. Her knees go soft. It's more likely the sand beneath it is shifted, the frame of reference changed, but she has to take a step back to keep from pitching forward. She can feel the hungry gravity of the Shrike. A thrill of elation whispers through her endocrine system. She was right. The Shrike is more than old detritus at the hinterlands of city and sea. This is something wrong. That's the moment she starts to make the plan. Her apartment is between the hardware store and the Shrike, so she stops in for a drink of water. When the glass is empty, she fills it with gin and drains it again. The 2 more blocks to the little hardware store slide by in a dizzy glee. Her cheeks hurt from grinning. The utter helplessness of the last month has evaporated like the late summer fog. She can't bring Trinity back, but she can fix the mistake. She can balance the scale. She fills a basket, a metal-cutting hacksaw, a pair of bolt cutters with absurdly long handles, a folding shovel, and a box of mints next to the register. She drops it all on the counter, too hard, and it clatters and nearly tips over. The clerk, the same elderly man with thinning black hair that has manned the register for the past 5 years, recognizes her despite the sunglasses she's still wearing. He lights up, his wide smile showing 3 silver crowns. She grins in response, both from reflexive politeness and the lingering manic glee. "Ah," he exclaims, pulling the heavy metal tools out of the basket and passing them in front of the humming scanner. "Got a big project planned?" She just keeps grinning from behind her mirrored lenses. She doesn't know what to say. Her teeth grind, the enamel threatening to give, but she keeps grinning. The clerk freezes for a minute, unsure of how to reclaim the script. "Where's the little one?" he asks as he rings up the mints. "Don't often see the 2 of you." "It killed her." She blurts it out, the words slippery and half-formed. She regrets saying it the moment she sees his face go slack, but it's too late. She doesn't know what to do, doesn't know how to escape the awkward moment, so she thrusts out her credit card and grins harder. It's silent in the store now, as other patrons turn towards her or pointedly away. Near the front of the store, a police officer has stopped shuffling through packages of batteries to turn and look. His brow furrows as his face slides into a theatrical mask of concern, worry, and sympathy. The familiarity of his worthless, insincere expression fills her throat with anger and shame, and she feels her legs tense with a sudden rabbit urge to run. The clerk is still staring, silvered mouth half agape. It's the look of a man who has heard an offensive joke he's not sure if he can let go without comment. She pushes the credit card down into his hands, the feral rictus of the grin feeling like an implicit threat on her own face. He places the tools in a bag and slides her the receipt. Neither of them make eye contact again. She meant to go straight to the Shrike, but the queasy interaction with the clerk has stolen some of the electric current from her limbs. She walks the 2 blocks east to the little market and selects a modest-sized bottle of gin. Back at the house, she decides it would be wise to go out after nightfall anyway. It's hot in a way that only September in San Francisco can be. When she moves, she's covered in a thin film of clinging sweat, and only stillness stops the flow. She draws the blinds and cranks up the air conditioner she never uses. She waits. An hour later, someone knocks on the door, a sharp, authoritative rhythm. She doesn't even consider answering it. She hadn't fallen in love with the infant at first sight, like everyone had told her she would. In the small hours of the first few mornings, the strongest emotions roused in her by the mewling, mindless grub had been an intertwined spiral of guilt and resentment. But when the hormones had shifted her brain chemistry into time-worn channels, the biological urge to protect her child felt close enough to love. She'd watched Trinity unfurl from a thing into a person, felt a numinous joy as the child blossomed into consciousness right in front of her. A delicate, self-assembling glass construct of innocence and desire emerging from the fog. And then she'd watched her die on the thorn, watched every delicate coil and loop of her daughter's mind undone all at once, a knot slit open with a sword. She wakes with a start. The clock bleeds red numbers, 12:51 a.m., and her head is throbbing. She fills the dirty glass with water, drains it, and fills it with the last of the gin. Then she pulls on a thin coat and hoists the hardware store bag over her shoulder and heads out into the cooling night to kill the Shrike. The Shrike is lit up as if the night knows well who rules this place. By day it's just the detritus of decades of careless urban planning, but under the stars all pretense is gone. It's the tooth of something malefic beneath the skin of the city, reflecting more amber streetlight than its rust-pitted exterior should allow. Her manic courage vanishes, splashing against the ground like a punctured amniotic sac. It's looking right at her. She knows the thought is absurd, even for all the framework she's built around the finger of rebar, all the hate and anger and guilt she's projected on it. But it is aware. It sees her. There is no momentum now, no tug, no feeling of righteousness. She has to pick up each leaden foot and drag it forward. The air grows thick as she approaches. The distant sound of the waves vanishes, as if the tides have stopped to watch. For the first time since she named the Shrike, something cuts through the grief, through the anger at herself and the mindless cruelty of physics. Terror, cold and oily, seeps through her skin and clenches at her lungs. Her heart skitters. The eyeless face of the Shrike still glares at her, but now it laughs with a lipless mouth, a low, arrogant chuckle like shifting sand and creaking metal. She shakes her head so hard that her teeth crack together and stomps the last few meters across the sand path. She starts to hum, a thrust of breath through clenched jaws, an insipid looping melody from Trinity's favorite TV show. And then she's there, close enough to touch the thing that killed her little girl. She drops down to her knees to look up close and to quell the sudden fear that she might pitch forward. The pull of gravity tilts at an angle here. She feels the cold, atavistic hunger radiating from the Shrike like a radio broadcast in her fillings. She tries the bolt cutters first. When the metal blades encircle the Shrike, she expects a swell of power and satisfaction, but instead she feels clumsy and weak. She can't find the right leverage, the right angle. She squeezes the long grips, but the blades only dig shallow divots into the old iron. She tries again and again, leaving parallel gouges across the base of the Shrike, the rust stripped back to reveal gleaming iron strength. The blade of the hacksaw won't bite. It slips and skitters across the surface, barely leaving a mark. She sucks in a deep breath, hums the little tune as loud as she can with her jaw set tight, and presses harder. The blade snaps with a musical twang. She tries to remove the curled wreckage of the blade, but as her cold hands fumble for the release in the dark, the serrated metal catches on her hands and bites deep. Blood spatters on the sand, tapping out a steady beat. She jerks her hands back, half in instinctual self-protection, half to keep the Shrike from finding any more nourishment in her pain. She sucks at the sliced fingers until the flow ceases. It's right next to her as she squats in the sand, just a thin rod of metal, but it seems to tower over her, to dwarf her tiny presence like an ancient tree. It's not her imagination, she realizes. The thing has grown, even since earlier today. Her blood has watered it twice now, and it will grow more. In the silent dark, she dreams of leaving, standing up, leaving the pile of tools and walking home to her bed. Tomorrow she has an appointment with a therapist. Tomorrow she can wake up clear, relishing the clarity of a headache in the morning sun. She can forget the Shrike. But that's a fantasy. She can't leave any more than she can reach her hands into the sand and pull Trinity back from the earth. She unfolds the shovel and begins to dig. The cuts on her hands open up and blood slicks the handle. She knows she's feeding the Shrike, but what's a little more blood when it's already gorged itself on her life? She's a half-meter down, and the iron roots of the Shrike keep going. It stands, erect and mocking in the wet pit, twice as tall now. She wraps her hands around it, feeling an electric frisson of revulsion with the touch, and tries to pull, but it's rooted too deep in the earth. She continues to dig. She doesn't hear the polite call of the officer from behind her, doesn't see his flashlight as it waves across the sand. She's too caught in the rhythm of digging, revealing more and more of the Shrike with each thrust into the earth. Each centimeter revealed is a validation. The deeper it burrows into the dirt, the more she knows she's not crazy. He reaches his hand out onto her shoulder. She screams, swinging the shovel up in an arc. He jerks back, not far enough, and the sand-covered blade slices across his forehead. A flap of skin peels back, blood misting the night air, and he drops the flashlight as he raises his hands in defense. The big black light rolls into the hollow at the base of the Shrike, backlighting it like some foul monument. The cop wipes the blood from his eyes, and she watches in horror as he flicks it into the pit, straight into the belly of the Shrike. She takes a step back. His eyes lock on hers, rimmed in blood and narrowed in frustration. One hand is on the grip of his service pistol. "Miss, I need you to drop the shovel and put your hands on your head," he says. She complies, letting the folding shovel fall. He relaxes, relieved at her compliance, and he half turns towards the pit, eyes casting about for the flashlight. She freezes, the moment on a knife edge, unsure of what comes next. "I tried coming by earlier today to check on you after—" He sighs as he steps closer to the Shrike. Some of your neighbors have been worried about you for a while." He bends over, reaching into the pit. "Can't be out here in the middle of the night, just—" He slips, one foot sliding on loose sand, and she knows the gravity of the Shrike has him. She reaches out. She wants to tell herself that she's going to grab him, to pull him back. But that would be a lie. She pushes him down. The Shrike bites deep into his gut. He's almost silent as he falls, just a brief, shocked exhalation. The iron glides up inside him. She can see the Shrike twisting, unmistakably alive and sentient, bending to find the cruelest path through his insides. He gasps as it punctures his lung, his body weight in her hands forcing him deeper onto the Shrike's thorn. It plunges through his heart until the hungering tip grinds to a rest on the bones of his ribs. He wraps a weak and trembling hand around the Shrike as blood cascades down into the maw of the pit. His eyes, glassy and fading like Trinity, tilt up to her. She holds him, pressing him into the Shrike, an offering, a plea. His last breath is a wet mist in the air, eyes fogging over as they mutely beg her for an explanation. She has none. There is none to give. She waits with him, kneeling in the pit as the Shrike drinks deep. She keeps digging. The dead man balances in the air on the tip of the Shrike as she descends beneath him into the mouth of the earth. The iron shaft of the Shrike burrows deep into the ground, and she follows it down, meter after meter. There are more dead down here, impaled on the great thorn. Centuries of dead. Skeletons with ragged bits of clothing and flesh clinging to the bleached bone. Fresh kills that twitch and gasp. She continues downward. A great iron tower of dead sunk beneath the ground, each one a tragedy, a gaping unhealed wound in the world of the living above, each one a meal for the insatiable Shrike. She knows what's coming. This deep the red walls of the pit breathe, a slow exhalation of the Shrike's innards. It's not the bottom. The Shrike has no end, no terminus, but she has come deep enough. Trinity, as fresh and warm as the day she died, is speared on the thorn. There is no going deeper. She has fed the Shrike, and now it shows her what she wanted to see. She came here to kill the cruel thing, but now, deep beneath the earth, with it devoured all around her, she sees how foolish the thought was. She might as well have tried to kill the sky. She curls up on the bleeding soil, wrapping her body around Trinity, around the thorn, and struggles to stay awake. Fatigue seeps into her bones. High above, through the narrow aperture, the sky turns the color of a livid bruise as the sun rises. The dawn light silhouettes the dead officer at the tip of the thorn. The hole above is shrinking, the earth closing like jaws. She shuts her eyes. She hoped to feel some measure of relief, some sense of accomplishment before the night ended. But instead, she feels nothing, just an exhaustion like brutal gravity. As the sky vanishes above, the Shrike swallows her for good. She wraps her arms around the dead child and hums the simple little tune.
Here's what Cameron had to say about the piece. The Shrike was my way of excising a very specific anxiety I had developed when living in San Francisco. The main character's neighbourhood was my neighbourhood, and the Shrike and the path are very real. I developed a persistent, horrifying image every time my young daughter danced by the Finger of Rust, and that image and fear persisted long after we moved out. Writing this story helped me purge that particular image, and while my anxieties certainly inform most of my horror, this is probably the most personal thing I've ever written. You can pick your truth here, as you can with so many of our stories. It's one of the things I love about horror, in fact, the genre's fundamental refusal to sit still. Take The Crow, a film which is often on my mind at this time of year. Looked at one way, it's a straight-down-the-middle gothic action-adventure movie. Looked at another, a blood-drenched love story. Looked at a third, a 2-hour scream of physical rage at the inescapable horrors of grief and entropy. And looked at a fourth, the embodiment of a life cut short in its prime. The question we should ask is not which story isn't true. The question we should ask is, which story is true for us? I was marked by grief and death early. In many ways, I view myself as lucky. God knows there were enough people closer to the situation than me who never got over the loss. I got a massively overdeveloped sense of mortality that spikes my adrenaline every time someone I know is in hospital, but by and large, aside from a light seasoning of survivor's guilt, very little else. The scars I carry are pink and faded, even if they never have, or will, truly disappear. Also, I got to leave. Physically, mentally, emotionally. I haven't lived on the Isle of Man for close to 2 decades, and I don't plan on that changing. I love my tiny rock, but it's a tiny rock, and the idea of spending time around the ghosts of who I used to be, navigating the complex topography of grief and history that the lead character struggles across here, straight out terrifies me. But that's because of time, as well as grief. There's a line from an early episode of The Blacklist I love. The line is this: "It will be the first thing you think of when you wake up, until, one morning, it will be the second thing." That's your release. That's your escape from that desolate, blasted plain. Eventually it fades. You may not want it to. You may want to reopen the wound, but I promise you, it will close. And I promise you that, in particular, is true. So what is this story? Is it the story of someone trapped forever, ripping that wound open, climbing inside the warm, moist flesh of their grief? Yes. And it's something almost all of us do, at one point or another. Our failures keep us warm, but they keep us chained to the campfire too. And grief is just more of the same. We need our pain, but not forever, and it's that second half we have the most trouble with. The horror of being trapped there is what unifies the two perspectives here. If the mother can't leave the moment she lost her child, or if the child was the latest sacrifice to the tree of murder beneath the city, ultimately, doesn't matter. Dead is dead. Over is over. The truth in this instance sets no one free, but does at least explain where and how they are being kept prisoner. Whether or not it matters, still another different story, because in the end this is a story about the almost inescapable weight of bereavement and what happens to someone who has no choice but to be yoked to it. We can pick our truth. The mother here, no such luxury. Complex, subtle, haunting, in the very best of ways. We rely on you to pay our authors and cover our server costs, and pretty much everything else. There are 3 ways you can do that. You can signal boost us, which is surprisingly easy to do. Leave a review on iTunes or on Google, or both, if you happen to listen to us on both. If you like an episode, tweet about it. If you like an episode and want to write it up on your blog, please do. Send us a link. We love that kind of stuff. If you are more minded to assist financially, also fantastic, and there are 2 ways you can do it. You can donate as much or as little as you want at PayPal. Go to pseudopod.org and click on Feed the Pod. There you'll be given an option to donate or subscribe. Alternatively, you can subscribe for as little as $5 a month through PayPal or Patreon. Now, that $5 a month level opens the door to the bonus content bucket. And it is pretty much a bucket. There's a lot of stuff in there. And that's brilliant. And there's some really good stuff in there, and it gets added to all the time. Alternatively, over on Patreon, there are higher levels which enable you to do things like be entered into a draw, the winner of which on a monthly basis gets a personalised reading recommendation list written by me. If you click on pseudopod.org and go to Feed the Pod, there you'll find two choices. The first is to donate for as much or as little as you want. The second is to subscribe for $5 a month and up. That $5 a month level is also available over on Patreon and gets you access to the bonus content bucket, which is crammed full of audio you won't find anywhere else from us and is updated regularly. Alternatively, there are higher levels on Patreon which get you some other really cool extras. Whatever you can do, please understand it's necessary and very gratefully received. So, for all of those of you who can pitch in, however you do it, thank you. We'll be back next week with Flash on the Borderlands, Objectification, featuring stories by Jen C.A. Morris, Lee Battersby, and Heather Thomas. Then, as now, we will be a production of Escape Artists Incorporated and released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. I'll leave you with two things. The first is this quote from the Dianea House by Eric Heiserer. She wrote in the article that Andrew was mumbling or muttering to himself when he entered the restaurant, but she didn't put in what he was saying. According to eyewitnesses, he kept saying, "The door is open." And the second thing I leave you with, coming up next, is the first episode of Darkest Night, Season 3. Enjoy, folks. We'll see you next time.
It's a PseudoPod. It's a big foot.
It's all about podcasts these days.
And you promise we'll get to see Ernie, right? I'll get to meet him?
Yes, sweetie, you'll get to meet Ernie the elephant.
But you said that the last time we went to Safari Valley. And then Dad got that call and...
No calls today, buddy. I promise.
Look, the gates are opening!
Welcome to Safari Valley, where every day is an adventure.
Hurry, let's get in line.
Matt was only 7, but his adorable yet persuasive charm had twice gotten him into Safari Valley, a local theme park his parents hated. Matt knew it and felt guilty for dragging them there, but he needed to meet Ernie. The toothy-smiled elephant was his favorite character on Safari Friends.
Look, there he is. Come on.
The little family hurried toward the end of the promenade, where a line had started to form around the park's most popular mascot. By the time they reached the end of it, the line had grown all the way back to the park's entrance.
Did you know that elephants are the largest land animals in the world?
Baby, this line is really long.
At least 40 minutes.
Why don't we do some rides first and meet Ernie after lunch?
Mom, I want to meet Ernie now.
Did you know that an elephant's skin is over an inch thick?
Your mom's right, buddy. Rides first. Hey, how about the tilt-a-whirl?
But you said...
Emily bent down to Matt's level and addressed her son.
I promise you, you will not leave this park until you've met Ernie the elephant. Do you believe me?
Yeah, I guess.
Did you know that elephants can live to be over 70 years old?
Matt, you're tall enough to do the cheetah chase this year.
I am?
The day passed quickly, and morning turned to midday, which turned to afternoon. Matt pointed out Ernie every time he saw him, but his parents were reluctant since the line never slowed down. Each Ernie that went unmet only frustrated Matt more.
Look, there's Rambo the Rhino. You want to meet him?
No, Dad. Rambo's lame. I want to meet Ernie.
Did you know that a group of rhinos is called a crash?
It has to be Ernie, huh?
Let's just get in line for the next Ernie we see. He's not going to be happy until he meets that damn elephant.
Don't say mean things about Ernie, Mom.
You're right. You're right. I'm sorry.
Did you know that rhinos can run up to 40 miles an hour?
The tired family continued around the park, rewriting rides and searching out Ernie the elephant. Matt's parents were weary, sunburned, and looking for an out.
don't see Ernie anywhere, sweetie. How about Jenny the giraffe?
Did you know giraffes sleep standing up?
No, I don't want to meet Jenny or Gordy or Winnie or Rambo. I want to meet Ernie. Please, Mom, you promised.
I did.
Em, it's 30 minutes to close. Look, I know you promised, but you can't work miracles, and I haven't seen an Ernie in over an hour.
What do you mean, an Ernie? There's just one Ernie, Dad.
You're right. I'm sorry, buddy. I'm just tired.
We promised him he'd see Ernie, Dawn. That's the only reason he cared about coming here. I'll ask one of the park staff.
Why don't we just slowly make our way towards the entrance and get in line when we see him?
But what if we don't see him? Would we just leave before I met him? Please, Dad.
We can't leave like this.
It's been a long fucking day.
Don't swear in front of Maddie.
Oh yeah, like you're a bastion of purity around the kid.
Okay, don't you dare start with me.
Matt blinked the tears from his eyes and turned away. It wasn't the first time his parents had fought in public, and he was embarrassed. All he'd asked for was to meet Ernie the elephant. And now, it looked like that would never be. Matt whipped his head up. Was that? Yes, that was a trumpeting elephant. Ernie was nearby. Matt jumped up and down, trying to see over the heads of the crowd. Where did it come from? Where was Ernie? If only he could get close enough. There, in between the buildings of the Midway Games, Matt could see Ernie walking. His green lounge coat was flapping behind him, and his tail was twitching. Ernie was getting farther away. Matt looked back at his parents. They grew louder and more animated in their argument.
We gotta figure this out or he's gonna throw another tantrum.
We can't change time.
Did you know elephants never forget? They remember every insult and rejection.
Matt took one last look at his parents, then bolted through the crowd after Ernie. He wouldn't miss him this time. He wouldn't. As Matt grew closer to the strip of Midway Games, he caught sight of Ernie between the buildings. Tripping over a tired father of two, Matt bolted through the alleyway, leaving the arcade and guests behind him.
Ernie? Ernie!
The park's PA system chimed in above.
Did you know elephants are born blind? Play a fun game with Ernie by finding him before he finds you.
Ernie?
Matt emerged from the alley to the quieter area behind the buildings. He looked left and right, searching for Ernie, among the generators and long cords stripping the pavement in front of him.
Ernie!
He watched as one of the long shadows began to move. It was Ernie. He was walking away from Matt.
Wait for me!
Matt ran to catch up with Ernie, dodging cords and littered soda cans.
Did you know elephants can run at speeds of up to 40 miles an hour? Better keep up.
Ow!
Matt thought about crying over his fall, but there was no one around to hear him, except for Ernie. And Ernie was almost to a small brown building nearby already. The elephant was headed for the door.
No, wait!
Ernie opened the door and disappeared inside. Matt stopped in front of it, contemplating. He knew he shouldn't follow Ernie, though that didn't stop him.
Did you know elephants make friends for life? Once you befriend an elephant, you'll have a pal forever.
Matt looked down a set of service steps, lit by orange utilitarian wall sconces.
Hey, are you down there?
Matt descended the stairs quickly, hoping to catch Ernie. At the bottom, he saw a long, wide hallway that split off in two directions at the end. The underground area was filled with long singing pipes and copper engines powering the park's rides above his head.
Ernie, where are you?
Ernie's trumpet came from the end of the hallway, though from which direction was impossible to tell. Matt ran as fast as he could, stopping at the fork, calling down both.
Ernie, can I just have a hug?
He studied the corridor the sound came from. It was darker than the other one, but the hum of machinery was louder.
Did you know elephants give the best hugs? Ernie has more than 40,000 muscles in his trunk to squeeze you with.
I'm coming, Ernie!
Matt ran after Ernie. Every time he came to a fork in the passageway, he would call to his favorite friend, and Ernie would answer. Matt followed until he was hopelessly lost. But that was okay. Ernie would show him the way out. He came to yet another intersection, and before he could even call, Ernie bellowed nearby. Matt spun toward the sound and turned the corner, only to find a dead end. The humming lights on the wall popped and sizzled. One went out, then two, until only 3 bulbs were left to light the now darkened hallway.
Ernie?
At his name, the elephant stepped out of the shadows. He stood underneath one of the remaining bulbs and froze.
I just wanted an autograph. My mom has my book. Can I... Oh, do you want a piece of candy? I have some Skittles in my pocket we could share.
Ernie opened his mouth until his jaw gaped open, and Matt saw into the black nothingness behind his small, square teeth. There was nothing behind them but a dense, consuming void.
Did you know elephants have large appetites and can consume up to 600 pounds of food?
Matt stepped forward and stood on his tippy toes and poured half the bag of Skittles down Ernie's throat, careful not to reach past his teeth.
How much do you weigh?
Matt stumbled back and looked up at the ceiling, searching for the speaker. He was starting to feel scared.
Are you talking to me?
Ernie hadn't moved. He stood still against the wall with his mouth open. Matt was afraid. This Ernie was different, not like his friend on TV. He suddenly wanted very much to find his mom and dad.
Okay. Bye.
Matt turned away, leaving Ernie standing there motionless, still gaping. As he turned the corner, Matt heard the pop of the bulb going out above Ernie. The sudden darkness pushed him forward like a wave in the ocean. Matt didn't remember his way to the stairs, but he ran anyway. Occasionally, he heard the pop and fizzle of the bulbs going out behind him. But still he ran, the labyrinth of corridors becoming more intricate and confusing as he went. He turned a corner and stopped short. Ernie stood against the wall at the very end of the hallway. He was facing Matt. A light bulb popped behind him.
Go away, Ernie. I want to go home.
Matt backed up and ran back down the dark corridor. There was little light, and long shadows moved alongside the chugging machinery.
Did you know elephants have excellent hearing? They can hear the quietest footstep from up to 3 miles away.
Go away!
Matt could hear Ernie's footsteps behind him. His heart was pounding. He was afraid to turn around to see, but he just couldn't help himself from looking back. Matt could see him in between the shadows. Ernie was following behind him with large, confident, unhurried yet thunderous strides.
Leave me alone!
Did you know elephants kill over 500 people per year? That's more than sharks and spiders combined.
Stop talking to me!
I'm not talking to you. I am just a recording.
Matt ran, Ernie followed. It grew so dark, Matt could not tell the moving parts from the limbs of the elephant.
Stop following me!
Matt was frozen in fear. He felt around in the dark hallway, scooting up against the wall, squeezing himself in between 2 concrete pillars. The corridor was pitch black, and he knew he was well hidden. Soon, Ernie would walk right by, missing him. He would stay right here. His parents would surely find him, or an employee would come by soon. The park should be closed by now, and they were probably already looking for him.
Did you know that while elephants are colorblind, they can see in the dark? Did you know Ernie is right in front of you? He's there in the dark. He's waiting.
Matt buried his head in his hoodie. No. It was lying. The voice was lying.
Just reach out your arm, and you can touch him.
Don't talk to me. Go away.
Suddenly, a hand grabbed Matt's ankle, and he was hauled out of his hiding place.
Let me go! Let me go!
Matt's body was jerked around a corner and into a room filled with dim light. A single wall sconce covered them in an orange hue. Ernie whipped Matt around until he could stare into the vacant glass eyes of the elephant costume.
I'll tell my mom!
Ernie let go, and Matt scrambled to his feet. The elephant stood silent and still, blocking the door, the only exit from the room.
Go away! Get out!
Ernie continued to stand, still as a statue, unflinching.
I know what you are. You're just a guy in a suit. You're trying to scare me. I hate you!
Nothing Matt said moved the elephant. Ernie continued to stand, arms at his side, head staring straight forward.
I hate you, I hate you, I hate you!
Anger overriding his fear, Matt ran up and knocked the head off the Ernie costume. There was nothing there. Where the wearer's head should be was only empty space. Matt stumbled back and fell against the wall. He couldn't take his eyes off it. Ernie hadn't moved. Only now, he didn't have a head.
What are you?
Did you know elephants are very intelligent and sometimes kill for pleasure?
Suddenly, the headless Ernie costume fell into a pile of empty cloth on the threshold. Whatever had been wearing it was gone. Matt choked back his tears and launched himself out of the room. He ran in the darkness, arms out in front of him. Matt must have turned a corner because a soft light started to tickle to the periphery of his vision. He turned toward it. Yes, there it was, at the end of the silent hallway, muted light spilling down from the ceiling. A staircase. He ran toward it.
Did you know it isn't going to let you go? You'll never come up the stairs. You'll be underneath this park forever.
Leave me alone. You're lying. You're a liar!
Matt was halfway to the bottom of the staircase. His lungs hurt, and his ankle throbbed where the thing had grabbed him. It was utterly silent, except the sound of his sneakers slapping the linoleum. A few more steps, and he was almost there. Matt was plunged into sudden darkness, yet again.
Let me go. I won't tell anybody. Please. Please.
He felt his way forward blindly. Matt thought the only way to reach the stairs was just to keep going.
Matthew! Matthew!
At the sound of his mother's voice, Matt stopped. It was coming from his left, from somewhere very far away.
Where are you, sweetheart?
Mom?
Matthew!
Matt turned and ran toward his mother, arms in front of him. Matt knew that if his mother was there, everything was going to be okay.
Matthew! Where are you? We can't find you!
Mommy! Daddy! I'm coming!
Matt ran and ran as he followed his parents' voices down the hallways. As he began to see the light of the exit, he noticed something in the distance. Something not quite so dark.
Matthew! How did you get down here?
Don't worry about it, Mom! I'm coming!
Underneath the last light bulb in the hallway, a shadowed figure stood underneath it.
Mom! I see you!
The closer Matt got, the safer he felt. It was his mother. He recognized the blue jacket and red hair. She opened her arms to receive him, and Matt flew into them. He was finally safe.
I was so scared. There's something down here with us.
He felt a hand on his shoulder.
We were scared too, kiddo. You're gonna be okay now. We need to get back upstairs. We're not supposed to be down here.
Dad? It's coming.
Is that Ernie?
Oh, look, there's an Ernie. Oh, maybe he'll talk to us.
Matt turned around to see what his father was pointing at. It was Ernie, of course, but there was something different about the costume this time. The face. The mouth. It was smiling.
No! We have to go!
Ernie pulled out an elephant tusk from his costume.
Holy shit! Dylan, get Matt out of here!
And stabbed Emily in the throat.
Oh my god! Emily! Emily!
Run, Maddie. I won't let him touch you.
Dad!
Matthew, no matter what happens, I will always love you.
Oh, Dad, no!
Ernie! Whatever you are, stay away from my son!
Dad!
Ernie stopped in its tracks. He dropped the bloody tusk and slowly sauntered up to Dylan. After a moment of pause, it smiled.
Stay quiet. If we don't move, maybe he'll leave.
Ernie opened his mouth and decapitated Dylan with one clean swoop.
Oh my god!
As he watched his father's detached head fall to the floor, Matt stood there in shock. Ernie slowly approached him, and Matt turned to run. As he tried to escape, he tripped over his mother's lifeless corpse.
Ow!
Never leave your enemy or their kin alive.
Ernie lifted his right foot and stomped down on Matthew's helpless body.
Thank you for visiting Safari Valley. Have a great day.
Darkest Night is available on iTunes as well as wherever podcasts are found. Episodes 2 and 3 of Season 3 are even available right now on the Darkest Night feed if you want to check it out. Darkest Night also has ad-free episodes in lossless sound quality available a week in advance and through Shudder. So, Episode 4 of Season 3 is available there now, ad-free. What's Shudder, I pretend to hear you ask? Well, Shudder is the top video-on-demand service for horror movies that has many of your and our favourite horror titles, including the original Halloween, Revenge, Channel Zero, and a ton more. And I have to be honest with you, it's an incredible lineup, and the one I would honestly subscribe to the service for is Channel Zero. That show is incredible. Just flat out amazing. Some of the best TV horror I have ever seen. You can get a free month of Shudder by using the offer code DARKEST at checkout. So, listen to the No Sleep podcast and Darkest Night. And again, if you want to check out Darkest Night a week early and ad-free, go to shuddr.com and use the code DARKEST and get a free month. And we'll see you back here next week. Have a good one, folks.